Got a A2 exam sketchbook question here from A2 Photography based on unusual portraiture. All right, this is a A2 photography project. It just explains there clearly what her intentions are before she starts. This is an A3 sketchbook. Different to some of the ones I've posted before, because this one has got basically a lot of like handwriting in instead of like the typewriting. It's all right if you've got decent handwriting, but if you haven't, it really is a good idea to word process it instead. This one shows you mood boards based on Bill Brandt, John Copland's, Carl Warner, and also I think the word there, I think it's Joaquin Van Marley, if I'm pronouncing it right. Probably not. All right, and also Bill Brandt looking out for composition. Awful lot of stuff going on there with the text, but if you read it, it does make sense. This one, a little mood board based on what she's intended to do, how she's intended to do it, connections to the artist, as well as then composition. Just on this next page here, what she's then got in is basically like a page sheet plan. You don't have to stick them in, but it's useful for yourself if you want to plan it. These next ones here are just more insightful bits of research beyond sort of a mood board that was then just put in before, where she's looking at then analysing, doing considerations, little post-process, that sort of thing. Okay, and in here as well, later on, after she's done the work, she's then put little digital montages in, which are where she's laid her work and the artist's work together. Next page here, she has then started to do a few drawings which she intended to layer in to her work later on. Sadly, that never happened, but it's just one of those things. There's nothing wrong with involving arts-based techniques as long as you see it through to the end. Don't just stick it in there randomly. Not always the best idea. And then straight into starting points. So looking at assessment objective 3, great that you've got a little artist link in there, explanations about what that's about in relation to your question. Don't just stick random starting points in there because it's going to look mental to the examiner. These ones in here, these are just showing the corrected images where she's then used levels, curves, little bits of topaz there to correct the images before she then goes on. That was one set. She then looked at creating initial developments. It says layers there, but it actually goes on to that later on. This is just looking at duplicate layers, where she's then using black and white, and also hard light layers, just to create a little bit more contrast so she's similar to the artist, but just in a photographic sense, so still just for AO3 there. Starting points 2, more compositions, again looking back at the artist as well. She's took them under decent lighting conditions. That's one of the things that she's tried to do, so she's then working in that similar style to show that she understands what the quality of the artist shots are. Next one there, she's just showing what those layers are in Photoshop. It does help if you screenshot it, show the examiner what's going on, and a little arrangement to show how she's starting to crop her images, cropping being an essential process to someone like Bill Brandt, who she covered in the research earlier on. Starting points 3, again, looking at hands, nothing really too different to the other set, but again, it's showing that she's gone back and taken another set of images. And again, more developments following that same sort of duplicate layer format. Just on this bit there, just been putting off there by the Soiser at the other side of the room. Oh, yes. This one here has got like more, sort of looking at knees, things like that. It is relevant to one of the artists here, which was one of Copland's images, where she then tried to literally recreate that same sort of composition. And at the same time, you can quite clearly see the difference between the developed side here, where she's then took that black and white layer over the top of that colour layer a little bit further into the rest of the work she's done. Just creating a little series of images there. They almost look like they're starting to create a bit of a landscape, which is what the look she was hoping to go for with someone like Carl Warner. It would have been great if she could have actually shown that and made that link more explicit, but at least it is easy to see visually there. As we go through the book again, starting points 5, still along the same thing, still in the studio, still loads of pictures, this time feet. Not really my thing, but there we are. Get your feet out. And this helps if you are taking pictures of the body. Sometimes it's difficult to get it into a photography unit. But if you're doing that, try and look for compositions that are interesting, that are different than just doing the same thing over and over again. It's quite nice here how she's then zoomed in to like look at like more sort of curves, more similar to the work of Edward Weston, or again Bill Brandt, where he looks for those close-ups to try and challenge what that picture could be. Start getting a little bit more interesting now, where she then looks at Carl Warner, quite a prominent sort of well-known photographer, and in this case as well, like the Sanix advert, where it was lots of overlapping bodies, body parts to try and make landscapes or larger images. She then analyses one of Carl Warner's images there, looking at the foreground, midground and background, and that becomes a really prominent feature in her work as it then goes on. Bit of a massive jump, but you know, go with it. It does actually work. These are all shots that were taken when she then went on to a visit to Dubai. I've never been to Dubai, and quite frankly, I'm not sure if I want to because it's so hot out there. You know what I'm saying? But apart from that, as you're going through, you can see that she's then corrected all those images there. Quite good composition for what she then does with them in the end. And again, she wants to try and get that landscape in there. That's what she's done from the start. And this is where the experimenting really takes off. and where like she starts to be ticking those sort of like those higher level assessment objectives, she's then talking about how she's going to layer and showing how she's layered images just from her own starting points, whether it's the sand and the hands or whether it's just the hands alone. And she's also done like a little step-by-step guide in Photoshop, really useful for the examiner to see, depending on, you know, whether they understand what's going on in Photoshop or not. Just helps anyone to see what you've done and how you've done it. Shows that level of understanding. Just go one stage further. These are more refined versions than before. She's thought more carefully about the placement of each one's of those different layers of hands and what have you. She's thought about those a bit more carefully. And then here she then goes into a level where she's then using her own clouds from either images she's taken or stock images and lens flares, just to give that the idea, like the images a bit more realism and a little bit more interest. This is then looking at this bit here, so it's called ABC. What she then does is she then mixes the 3 images in a row in the same way that's shown here, A, B and C there, where she's looking at like the clouds in the background, the midground, and then the foreground with the sand. Then she takes it to the stage where she then pattern stamps in, converting all images to patterns and then pattern stamping them onto either white or black backgrounds just to create almost like a sort of a sandstorm effect, which is relevant to the location she photographed it from. And like she did right at the start, broke down one of Warner's images, she's then doing the same to her own image there, which is a really great link to the end. Again, another little cheeky art-based process just creeping in there with cellulose thinners. They almost look like sort of aged photographs that have possibly been left in that location. Would have been lovely if she would have relayered them in and used that, but sadly never got round to that. And on the back few pages here, what she's then got are little bits of developments explained in terms of steps and stages. And then just as a little refinement right at the end, she's then got a little picture of Jerry Yulsman there just to show the reason why she's then used the hands and the landscapes together. It's not as smooth as, say, some of the ones she's done earlier, but it's definitely relevant to this artist connection and something if she would have had even more time, she would have investigated even further. And then just in the back of the book, these sheets here, she's also got larger enlarged outside of the book, along with larger final pieces. And what that basically clearly explains is her images and how they link them with the artist, with a little bit of information about that. I don't think you'll be able to read that from the video, but if anyone wants to know what it is, just give me an email and I can send it out. These ones here, the last couple of shots in this one are just showing where it's a bit tricky to see, where she's then relieved each one of those layers up onto foreground, midground, background, and the same as what she's done for the more developed images. And that's pretty much how the book finishes. The only thing which is not on here are enlargements which she's had professionally printed, which I won't put in the video because you've already seen some of the stuff as it is. Okay, hope that helps. Toodles.